Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that this is actually part 2 of the video, and if you haven't watched part 1, I advise you to go ahead and quickly do that first, otherwise you might be a little lost as to what exactly am I doing here. Enjoy! Okay, 4 books down and we have 6 more to go. And so far, really, I'm keeping way more books than I thought I was gonna, but it is what it is. I am genuinely interested in the ones that I decided to keep, and I think it's only fair. So now let's go into spin number 5. Okay, so Dark Shores by Daniel L. Jensen. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure. I do believe I've heard this author's name in the context of another book, but I can't right now remember which one it was. I'm gonna wager this is a fantasy romance, young adult fantasy romance, although I'm not 100% sure. I might be entirely wrong. Again, when I bought the book, I didn't think to read the synopsis of it. What I can see, though, is that here on the cover we have a praise from Sarah J. Maas, who is an author that I have a love-hate relationship with. I do love her Throne of Glass series, and I despise the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So her opinion is valuable, but not entirely. So let's read the synopsis of this book. Oh no, it is sea related. I should have guessed because it's here on the cover. Let's see. A sailor with a will of iron. Teriana is the second mate of the Queenessence, a sheep beholden to the goddess of the sea. Her people are born in the waves, and they alone know how to cross the impulsive oceans between east and west. Marcus is the commander of the 37th, the notorious legion that has led the Selendor Empire to conquer the entire east. The legion is his only family, but even they don't know the secret he's been hiding since childhood. When an Empire senator discovers the existence of the Dark Shores, he captures Teriana's crew and threatens to reveal Marcus's secret unless they sail in pursuit of conquest, forcing the two into an unlikely and unwilling alliance. They unite for the sake of their families, but both must decide how far they are willing to go and how much they are willing to sacrifice. Okay, so it's gonna be a haters to lovers romance, fantasy romance is what I'm getting from this synopsis. I am not a big fan of the sea setting. Just any naval setting is not my favorite. That doesn't mean that I necessarily hate it, but it's not what I would go for generally, which is funny given that I bought a book that's called Dark Shores and has a ship on its cover, but here we are. So let's give it a go. Alright, the good news is that this is not a first person, so I'm happy about that. Okay, I am done with Dark Shores by Daniel L. Jensen, and this is definitely a fantasy romance. I do believe it's adult, but I'm not 100% sure. I can check it later on Goodreads. Now, the thing about this book is that it is well written. The author has a very nice way with words that makes it very easy to get through the narrative. The book reminds me a little bit of An Ember in the Ashes because the Empire... Sorry, my cat is going ham on the couch. The empire that is being depicted here is very similar to the Roman Empire, which is actually the inspiration for An Ember in the Ashes, and also the archetypes that are being used in this book are very similar to the ones that are used in An Ember in the Ashes, especially the main male POV. The problem is that the book is very romance-centric from what I can tell so far, and I am not big on sea voyages in general, as I mentioned earlier, on top of which the mysteries that are being said in this book aren't interesting enough to keep my attention in particular, so I think I'm gonna get rid of this one. I gave it a fair shot. I read 54 pages of it, reaching chapter 8, but it's just not for me, and again, that doesn't mean that it's a bad book, it's just not what I like, so I'm gonna give it up, and somebody else is definitely gonna enjoy it more. Alright, so we're halfway done with the books, and so far I have decided to Unhaul 2, which is not a bad thing. Let's go into spin number 6. Nice. Crown of Feathers by Nikki Pau Preto is a young adult fantasy book and is one of the books that I own for a very, very long time because I heard about it on booktube and I've been meaning to read it ever since and never even opened it once. So I am kind of excited to see what this is gonna be about. I do hope it's a good one, but if it's not, or rather if I don't necessarily like it myself, I'm sure that a lot of people will be glad to read it. So let's dive into it. Okay, so it's the next day and I am done with Crown of Feathers, though I realized I never read you the synopsis yesterday, so I'm gonna do that now, and after that I'm gonna share my thoughts with you about the book. I had a sister once. In a world ruled by fierce warrior queens, a grand empire was built upon the backs of phoenix riders, legendary warriors who soared through the sky on wings of fire, until a war between two sisters ripped it all apart. 16 years later, Veronica is a war orphan who dreams of becoming a phoenix rider like the heroes of old. After a shocking betrayal from her controlling sister, Veronica strikes out alone to find the riders, even if that means disguising herself as a boy to join their ranks. But it is a fact of life that one must kill or be killed, rule or be ruled. Just as Veronica finally feels like she belongs, her sister turns up and reveals a tangled web of lies between them that will change everything. And meanwhile, the new empire has learned of the riders' return and threatens to destroy them once and for all. Sometimes the title of queen is given, sometimes it must be taken. Okay, so this synopsis kind of frustrates me because while it is accurate, it gives away a lot of information that shouldn't be given and then doesn't give other type of information that should be given. For example, nowhere does it mention that the girls are actually animagus and they can bond animals and they have found 2 phoenix eggs. I don't think they should have revealed that the sisters fall apart or that one of them disguises as a boy and joins a clan and then the other one shows up again. It's not information that is divulged early in the book, so I don't think it should have been given here. The setup looked interesting to me to begin with. I really like this cover and I have a soft spot for phoenixes. I think they're fantastic. You can see them all throughout different mythologies and I think they're fascinating as a concept, and you don't see many books including them. At least I haven't seen that many, so the idea really appealed to me. But then reading through the beginning of this book, I didn't feel gripped. The book itself read a little too young, and I do understand that this is a young adult book, but with some young adult books you can still feel a level of maturity, and here I feel as though the book has been written for 12 to 14-year-olds, and unfortunately I am no longer of that age. On top of that, there was a little too much exposition, and again I attribute that to the fact that it was written for a younger audience. I don't think this is a bad book. It's probably a great book, but it's definitely not something that I'm gonna get into, so I think I'm gonna get rid of this one. Okay, 6 books down, 3 are out and 3 are staying, and let's go into spin number 7. The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman. This is a book that I know absolutely nothing about because I didn't even purchase it technically. It came with one of the Illumicrate boxes, I think, as a second additional book. And if I had to guess, I would guess that this is a fantasy book, but that is just a feel that I have. I have zero proof for that. So let's read the synopsis really quick. Veera is desperate to establish her legacy as a revered Maharani of Ashoka, but with the country's only quarry running out of magic, a precious resource that has kept Ashoka safe from conflict for centuries, she can no longer protect her citizens from the looming threat of war. Veera's only hope is to find a mysterious artifact of legend, the Ivory Key, but in order to retrieve it, she must reunite with her estranged siblings who have taken very different paths. Veera, Ronak, Caleb, and runaway Riva each have something to gain from finding the Ivory Key, and even more to lose if they fail. But with each sibling harboring secrets, the very thing that brought them together could tear apart their family and their world for good. Okay, this sounds somewhat interesting. I'm not 100% sure that this is something I'm gonna be into, but it's nice to read about siblings. It's not something that I see very often in fantasy as a large group of siblings. I mean, let's go read it. Okay, it is a few hours later and I am done with the ivory key. I'm sorry I'm gonna have to be holding the camera like this, but my stand is all the way over there and I have a cat sleeping right here and I wouldn't want to disturb the peace of this holiest of creatures. Okay, so let's talk about this book. First of all, I really like the writing style. It is nothing spectacular, it's pretty simple, but it makes reading the book quite easy and quite nice, so points for that. Secondly, I do like the setting. I think the core story here is quite interesting in its premise. We have a country whose main resource, let's say, is magic, and they've been trading it with other kingdoms that surround them, but all of a sudden the trade is stopping and the other countries think that they're withholding the magic, while the truth is that they actually ran out of it. We are supposed to follow 4 main characters as far as I understand, though so far I have only seen 3, the first of which is the current Maharani, if I'm pronouncing this correctly. That is something like a queen or empress in this world. She is trying to deal with this magic problem and all kinds of other problems for that matter. Then we also follow her sister, who's a rebel essentially, and one of her brothers who's trying to free the other brother from prison. And the other brother is in prison because he is suspected of killing their mother, actually, as far as I currently understand. So we have a very interesting sibling dynamic that's going on here, and that really appeals to me. The core story of this book is quite good, but my main problem is that I just don't care. And that is, I believe, because the author did 2 mistakes that a lot of contemporary authors tend to make. The first being that she's rushing into the action like somebody's chasing her, and that is probably because this is a young adult book, and usually those books have faster pacing because, let's face it, younger people have way more energy and can't sit still for too long, and I understand that. But to me, that is not something that I like, and it takes away from my enjoyment. And then the second one, and the bigger one that I'm starting to notice in a lot of books, is that in the beginning of the book, the author quickly dumps all of the trauma that a character has gone through, and that I guess is supposed to substitute character building, and it's really annoying to me. It's like meeting a brand new person and then immediately trauma dumping all over you about everything that's wrong with their life. It doesn't really make me empathize more with that person. It kind of makes me apprehensive about them. I mean, I couldn't even open this book and immediately this chick is like,
oh, my mom never loved me and she was very harsh on me and I have so many responsibilities and my mom is now dead and my siblings are gone
and my council doesn't like me and I want to use my old knife but I can't because it doesn't have magic and this new one is not as comfortable.
And in my head I'm like, who are you, lady, and why am I supposed to care about this? I think a lot of authors forget that while they know these characters very well in their own head because they spent a lot of time with them whilst writing them, we don't know them. And in order for me to care for these things, I need to get to know this character first. It's important to understand that just because somebody has been through things and has trauma, it doesn't make them likable or a person worthy of following. Because you know what? Trauma is not uncommon. Go out on the street, close your eyes and point at anybody and there will be a person with trauma and with things they've been through. And this is my problem with this book. I'm supposed to care about these people. I just don't know. And maybe later on in the book, I would gain more understanding and will care more about these people. But as of right now, it could be a good story, but I have no interest in continuing to read it. So unfortunately, I'm gonna get rid of this one. Okay, I actually had to disrupt the cat because I can't do this with one hand. So it's time for spin number 8, and so far I have finally gotten rid of more books than I decided to keep. And to be honest with you, this is already way better than I expected. Let's go into spin number 8. Cool. Caraval by Stephanie Garber is a young adult fantasy, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's adult, not 100% sure. And I think it's about a magical carnival that comes to a city or some such, and two sisters, and one of them is supposed to fall in love. This is a terrible explanation, but is what is remaining in my head since the last time I read the synopsis. This book actually was featured in one of my videos way back in the day, I think around the beginning of my channel. If I manage to find it, I will link it over here. It was about books that I own and don't plan to read whatsoever, and this was one of the books I mentioned as such book. But here we are today, and I'm gonna give it a try. First, let's look through the synopsis. Remember, it's all a game. What happens beyond this gate may frighten or excite you, but don't let any of it trick you. Once a year, the infamous master legend hosts Caraval, open only to those who have been invited. This year, the week-long game is on Legends glittering Isla de los Sueños, where the winding streets are an elaborate snow-covered maze and the people are never who they really seem. At midnight on the first day, the snow begins and the visitors become players. Each of them is trying for the coveted prize, a single wish. All they must do is unravel the mystery of Caraval, but in a game where danger hides behind every charming smile, winning isn't without loss, and their wish might be their last. Cool. Sounds actually quite interesting. Is it possible that I was actually thinking of a different book when I was talking earlier? I guess we shall see. Alright, so I am done with Caraval by Stephanie Garber, and I am very, very surprised by this book in a nice way. First thing as always is the writing style of the author, and I think she has a very, very nice way of putting out a sentence that makes it easy to read, but also quite beautiful without being difficult. Second thing, and that is one thing I am very, very impressed with, is the way that she introduced our main character, especially as opposed to the last book I talked about, because here we have no exposition whatsoever, and it's done in such a nice, seamless way with just a few letters. The book starts like this, with just this one sentence saying, "It took 7 years to get the letter right." And then we proceed to see all 7 letters written by our main character, Scarlett. They're all very short, and they're all addressed to this master legend who's the master of this Caraval. And through those 7 letters, we can see how this young girl has grown, her values, what she cares about, what her situation is. It's just so pretty and so seamless. And at the end of these 7 very short letters, you feel like you know her. And I particularly very much liked her. The series of letters ends with a response from this master legend, which sets up the story itself, and then we continue into meeting the rest of the characters. The story is very whimsical in my personal opinion, and I think it's going to be very fun. I think it's young adult fantasy romance. I didn't check it in Goodreads, but that's my impression so far. I did not expect to like it so much. I'm not a big fan of this sort of concept, but I did like how the author set it up. I do like the world that she has created. I am gripped and intrigued, so I am going to keep this one. Okay, we are down to our final 2, and so far the score is equal for I'm giving away and for I'm keeping. So let's see what the final situation is going to turn out to be. And this is actually going to be our final spin, since once we do it, it will be very clear which one is going to be the last book. Alright, we're starting with the popular one. Black Sun by Rebecca Ronhorst. I've heard a lot of things about this book, but not a lot of them have stayed in my head. I do believe there is a child god here, or some such, and this book has been making its rounds on booktube for a few years now. I have heard some people say great things about it. I have heard some people say that they absolutely despised it, so we're gonna see how I feel about it. But before we do that, let me read you the synopsis. A god will return when the earth and sky converge under the black sun. In the holy city of Tova, the winter solstice is usually a time for celebration and renewal, but this year it coincides coincides with a solar eclipse, a rare celestial event prescribed by the sun priest as an unbalancing of the world. Meanwhile, a ship launches from a distant city bound for Tova and set to arrive on the solstice. The captain of the ship, Xiala, if that's how you pronounce that, is a disgraced teak whose song can calm the waters around her as easily as it can warp a man's mind. Her ship carries one passenger, described as harmless. The passenger, Serapio, is a young man, blind, scarred, and cloaked in destiny. As Xiala well knows, when a man is described as harmless, he usually ends up being a villain. Okay, that is a very interesting synopsis, actually. I am very much looking forward to giving this book a read. Now let's go ahead and do it. Oh, are you so sad? Yes, this is the one place you shouldn't be. Okay, so I am done with Black Sun and oh my god, I'm very impressed. So this is definitely a fantasy book, and as far as I remember from hearing somewhere, it is based or rather inspired by pre-Columbian South American culture, which is really cool because I don't think I've ever read a book with this sort of inspiration / setting. So far, we are following 3 characters, or at least I've seen 3 different points of view, one of which is very funny, the other is very mysterious, and the third one is both mysterious and very, very creepy, though through no fault of his own, he is rather forced into this role. I really enjoyed the writing style of this author. I think she has an amazing way with words. It is very simple but very enjoyable and just unassumingly beautiful, if I can call it that way. Now, I have to warn you, chapter 1 is very, very difficult to get through. At least it was for me. I actually had to take a minute to get myself together after reading it because it features 2 of the things that I don't do well with. The first of which is body horror. I can't do body horror, okay? And then the second one is child abuse, and those 2 are combined together in chapter 1. And while it is done in a fantastic way and for a good reason, it's necessary to set off the rest of the book, it still was not easy for me to get through it. Either way, I really like the atmosphere of this book. I like the setting, I like the characters, and I'm intrigued by the mysteries and what's gonna happen next. So I'm gonna keep this one. Also, look at this amazing cover. Is there anything more creepy than replacing somebody's eyes with anything else? And we now come to the final book of this experiment, which is going to be Song of the Far Isles by Nicholas Bowling. This is either a young adult or a middle grade book, and that's really all I know about it. And would you be surprised to hear that I bought it purely on cover because I thought this was gorgeous. It just has a very nice feel to it, and I was really excited to get it. And surprise, surprise, I have not read the synopsis yet, so let's do it together now. Oren's home is on the far isle of Little Drum, where everyone lives and breathes music. When their way of life is stopped by an order of silence from the ruling Red Duchess, it is Oren who must go in search of the island's last hope, a mythical instrument made of whale bone with the power to change hearts and minds. Okay, this is interesting and original. I wouldn't say that I've seen this concept before, but I also couldn't say that I'm too excited about it. Still, let's give it a quick read. Okay, so I am done with Song of the Far Isle, and to be honest with you, I'm not impressed. Number 1, I didn't like the writing style. It felt a little vague and indecisive. I couldn't get into it. Number 2, I didn't like the main character. I just didn't click with her, and that's a little strange because she's a little girl, and usually I like this type of main characters. Unfortunately, in this case, it just didn't happen. Not to mention that I found her slightly obnoxious. And number 3, I just didn't find the stakes high enough or the mystery as compelling. For example, whenever I have read other middle grade to young adult books which I have loved, there have always been very, very high stakes, so it was worth suspending my disbelief or enduring a more simplistic writing style. In this case, I just didn't find that. And granted, being forbidden to play music is a terrible thing, but compare that to the end of the world and the situation is a little different. And so all that being said, I'm pretty sure you can already deduce that I am not going to be keeping this book. So at the end of this lovely experiment, out of the 10 books that I tried to read, I decided to keep 5 and get rid of 5. The ones that I'm keeping are Caraval by Stephanie Garber, The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley, Scythe by Neil Schusterman, Black Sun by Rebecca Ronhorse, and Down Comes the Night by Alison Saft. On the other hand, the books that I'm getting rid of are The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman, Crown of Feathers by Nikki Pao Preto, Broken Wish by Julie C. Dow, Dark Shores by Daniel L. Jensen, and Song of the Far Isles by Nicholas Bowling. This was so much fun for me and I am definitely doing it again. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and please let me know in the comments down below whether you have read any of these books, whether you own any of these books, and generally how you're doing. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see some other random videos on this channel, check out this playlist. Bye.